I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to talk about Nicolai Hartmann's Ontology, which is a stratified structure of reality. How can we understand reality? At the very beginnings of philosophical thinking in the West, the ancient Greeks tried to reduce it all to one arche or principle. Aristotle tells us that Thales, considered the first philosopher of the Greek tradition, considered the arche as water. Anaximenes and Diogenes considered it to be air. Hippasus of Metapontium and Heraclitus of Ephesus thought it was fire. Empedocles was the first to make a break from that single arche, believing it was all four of the primal elements. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae then claimed that arches are infinite in number, since parts of things are individual principles unto themselves. Parmenides returned to the single arche, but went further. It is not just one arche that underlaid everything. Everything is in fact one single monolithic, unchanging, and eternal thing. This tendency to find a single arche did not end with the Greeks. Even today, over 2,500 years later, the attitude that one arche can explain everything remains with us. Materialism, idealism, and teleology are three such doctrines. Materialism or physicalism reduces everything, including the immaterial, such as thoughts and ideas, to atomic or physical interactions, while idealism does the same, except it reduces everything to the mental, such that physical objects are in reality figments of thought. Nicolai Hartmann belongs to a long tradition of philosophers working on ontology, but he thinks that to find the one arche that underlies everything, or even a small group of arches to which everything is reducible to, is wrong. He also makes a break from the transcendental philosophy of Immanuel Kant. Kant's critical epistemology explains how we can only understand phenomena, which are representations of reality, but never reality in itself, or noumena, because all reality, in order to be understood, has to be processed through the structure of our understanding, which are his 12 categories, space and time. As for teleology, Hartmann does not think that there is some final cause dictating how everything goes. All these metaphysical and epistemological solutions fail to describe adequately the real world and present their own sets of difficulties. For Hartmann, an explanation of reality is not reducible ultimately to one principle or even a group of them. Instead, reality is a structure of levels, of strata, which are interconnected and hierarchical. Hartmann was influenced by Aristotle's levels of the soul. According to Aristotle, all living things have souls. Plants have vegetative souls, which can feed, grow, and reproduce. Animals have, in addition to the functions of the vegetative soul, sensitive souls, where they use their senses for perception and locomotion, while human beings have the capabilities of the vegetative and sensitive soul, but in addition also a rational soul, which is able to think, reason, and understand. Both Aristotle and Hartmann claim to derive their levels from empirical or ontic observation, but Hartmann brings Aristotle's nested structure of the soul further. Hartmann observes in his New Ways of Ontology, published in 1941, that the world comprises inanimate object, plant, animal, man, society, and history. These things correspond to four strata of inanimate things: animate beings, psyche, and finally spirit, respectively, with the stratum of spirit including man, society, and history. Higher strata cannot be reduced to a lower one, and lower strata do not originate from a higher one. Within these four strata, are categories unique to each strata, and then there are fundamental categories that straddle all the strata. According to Hartmann, our comprehension of reality and reality itself are not restricted to phenomena the way Kant would have it. He espouses realism, where knowledge is a knowledge of concrete things. Human beings are part of the world. We are not standing apart from it, looking at the world as if divorced from it. Instead, we are things in the world that affect and are affected by things in the world. Our knowledge is a process which takes place in the world. Our thoughts are primarily directed towards concrete things in the world, and only secondarily are they reflective on our own thoughts. Hence, Hartmann thinks that our natural attitude is to believe that how we perceive things are how things in fact are. They are not merely representations in our mind, which may not resemble their objects because of the mental processing by the structures of our minds. Moreover, he wants to avoid speculation, specifically the speculations of speculative metaphysics, and confine himself to analyzing the actual world. According to John E. Smith, Hartmann believes in ontology but not in metaphysics, where metaphysics is a speculative theory of the nature of being and its basic unity. Hartmann's ontology is instead an analysis of the real world aimed at disclosing its levels and their constituent categories together with the laws governing the numerous interrelationships involved, an empirical discipline in the sense that it presupposes a given reality. These levels or strata are the structure of the world, and they relate to one another in regular ways, which Hartmann then expresses as laws. The categories of the lower strata are stronger, with the higher strata dependent on the lower ones, while the lower ones are indifferent to the higher levels. The lower levels persist without the higher. For instance, inanimate objects like rocks do not need psyche to persist. But the higher cannot persist without the lower. For instance, spirited beings like human beings cannot do without material bodies. A human being is made of matter the way inanimate objects also are, is a living thing like animate objects such as plants, possess psyche as animals do, and in addition have spirit. Hence an object belonging to the highest level, such as a human being, also possesses the characteristics or categories of all the lower levels. However, the categories of the higher strata have novelty and possess autonomy from the categories of the lower strata despite being dependent on them. The categories of a lower stratum serve as material for a higher stratum and in that way limit the possibilities of the higher stratum, but they do not completely determine it. There is a continuity between the strata, but there is also a border and gaps between them which allow for novelty and autonomy, making the higher strata irreducible to the lower ones. A being is unified in its structure, but that does not mean it is monolithic with no levels at all. How Hartmann derives his categories is from an analysis of concrete objects and the empirical knowledge concerning their behavior. Hence, for categories to be successful, they have to adequately describe things. I will now list the categories just for completeness and so you understand what they look like. Fundamental categories cross all strata, and they are unity and multiplicity, concord and discord, contrast and dimension, discretion and continuity, substratum and relation, element and structure, form and material, inner and outer, determination and dependence. Some are qualitative contraries such as identity and difference, generality and individuality, while some are modal categories such as possibility, actuality, necessity, and their negative counterparts. The categories of the first stratum of inanimate things are space and time, process and condition, substantiality and causality, simultaneous process or reciprocity, dynamic structure and dynamic equilibrium. The categories of the second stratum of animate beings are organic structure, adaptation and purposiveness, metabolism, self-regulation, self-restoration, the life of the species, the constancy of the species, and variation. The categories of the third stratum of the psychic are act and content, consciousness and unconsciousness, pleasure and displeasure. The categories of the fourth stratum of the spirit are thought, knowledge, will, freedom, evaluation, and personality. As noted, Hartmann's ontology posits categories which are novel and autonomous in the higher strata relative to the lower ones. This has implications for the existence of free will. Determinism is ruled out since it posits that every effect is completely determined by preceding causes, which are in their turn completely determined by antecedent causes. Determinism hence makes novelty and autonomy impossible throughout Hartmann's structure, contrary to his laws, since the nature of the lower stratum will then determine completely the nature of the higher stratum, which violates the autonomy of the higher strata. Hartmann also rejects teleology, where final causes or purposes dictate the nature of everything down to their material basis, which eliminates free will. Likewise, idealism is rejected because the mind, which belongs to the higher stratum, will be the determinant of the material world, since the material world only exists as a construct of the mind. In his ontological structure, this will mean that the higher strata determine the nature of the lower, which violates his laws of dependence, where the lower strata are stronger than and indifferent to the higher strata. For Hartmann, both autonomy in the higher strata and their dependence on the categories of the lower strata are based on empirical facts and are hence compatible. Novelty and autonomy is found in each stratum, not just the highest, since the categories of each stratum are different from those of the other strata. Human freedom, considered ontologically, is only a special case of the thoroughgoing autonomy of higher forms over the lower, he adds. Freedom in human beings is only one instance of the autonomy found also in other things, in line with the structure of reality. These things exhibit a freedom in dependence, a freedom from the lower strata while depending on the lower strata, and this freedom in dependence permeates the entire structure of the world. Many philosophers tend to emphasize the special place of human beings in the cosmos, but for Hartmann, human beings as things in the world, among other things, must be understood in relation to and not above or apart from the world. This is why analyzing the human being gives insight into the strata and categories of reality, since the strata and categories found in human beings are also found in the things of the world. Likewise, analyzing other things also can give insight into the nature of human beings, if only for the lower strata, since human beings, society, and history are the only strata in Hartmann's structure that have spirit. We are then compelled to ask the curious question, is spirit the epitome of reality? Is there any strata above that, such as the divine, or do the categories of the proposed divine strata not exceed or differ from the spirit stratum, the way society and history also belong to the stratum of spirit? And would the divine then also have to have the physicality, biology, psyche, and then mind of the structure? Or if not, then is the divine a stratum unto itself, divorced from the other strata, so transcendent that it is separated from anything in this world, like Plotinus's one? How about the totality of everything? Is there in the totality any unity that would then render it spirit? Or is the totality merely a collection of things that together do not exceed spirit, or at least do not create a whole new stratum by itself? Did such questions bother Hartmann as he was constructing his structure, or do they exceed the realm of the empirical and the knowable, such that he refused to admit them for fear of treading into speculative metaphysics which he wanted to avoid? Hartmann's theory do not speculate on why things are the way they are. There is no creation story, not even a grand telos that informs the nature of reality. From his analysis, he realizes that there is no single arche or even a group of arches that covers all things. He takes the way things are as given and known through empirical observation and then proposes a structure which captures how they are. In that way, he escapes the intellectual trap of exceeding the boundaries of our knowledge, laying out a framework by which we can then articulate what we can understand, though that may not satisfy the human spirit, which desires to go further, even beyond where we can legitimately go. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.